So,
So,
there you go, Bo. This week we have a special guest. It's Flo Bristinson.
Hello, hello.
Is that your real name?
It's real enough.
All right,
aka Flow Rider.
Flo Rida. That's your rapper name.
I can't rap right now, though.
No?
Sorry, guys.
All right. Anyway, yeah, Bo's here just to hang out and see what's going on. He'd be giving us a review, basically he's here to, what do you call those? Like kind of like an audit in a certain sense, but just to see where our weak points are, where our strong points are, what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right.
Make sure everything's kosher.
Make sure everything is there's enough equity.
Inclusion,
diversity.
I don't see a lot of diversity.
You
Sorry.
don't see a lot of
That's
diversity.
already going
You've
to
got
my
a black
notes.
mark already because there's
Yeah.
basically two white guys. Well,
Yeah.
three white guys if you include Scotty, but I think Scotty identifies as part
Jamaican.
Jamaican, yeah.
Part Jamaican, yeah.
And no wrong think. The moment there's wrong think, Bo's going to be all over it.
I have my notebook here.
He's got his notebook. Show us
Gonna-
your notebook.
Gonna make some notes.
Gonna make some notes.
See.
Yeah, it'll be full of notes. Okay. Well, that's a lot of extra pressure on us, but we'll try and do our best. Just don't try not to interrupt too often. Only when it's really necessary, okay? But it's good, yeah, that we have a bit of oversight. Because, we've got all that unconscious stuff going on, unconscious biases and stuff. And I know you've been trained in spotting those biases, right? No?
Hardcore training.
Hardcore training in spotting those biases. Okay. So, all right, without further ado, let's do what's been going on over the past week. Has it been a week already?
Yeah.
And absolutely nothing has happened in the past week because it's a slow period because of the summer holidays. Or not the summer holidays, but it's summer, right? And people are going on holidays. And that includes just about everybody. So everybody at least has less time to focus on stuff that they don't like and to, complain about it and create media storms about it and shit storms and stuff like that and put it on Twitter. So there's not as much news, really. And there's also, there's a bit of a lull, I suppose, after the whole beginning of this year, Ukraine. Well, there was a couple of shootings and stuff. There's kind of almost like...
There was Kazakhstan, but just before that as
yeah,
well.
nobody knows about Kazakhstan.
Well, it led the news even in the US for about a week.
Right, yeah.
The years usually seems that's the pattern now. It starts with a whole flurry of things.
Yeah. Just kick the year off. And
But
then
once Russia invaded Ukraine,
That was it.
They changed the whole schedule.
nothing else.
They
was-
dominate now.
Yeah, although that's trailed off as well. Like there's a lot of war fatigue going on, especially since they finally admitted that Ukraine isn't winning bigly, as it was from the very beginning. They're kind of like, possibly not true that Ukraine is actually winning. Possible that they might actually be sort of not winning, not losing, but not winning. Although they keep the reports up that especially from Zelensky and people like that. Quote him saying, yeah, we're going to take back the Donbass and Crimea and Moscow and, we're still going to win. We're still going to do it. While the whole thing is just such a massive shit show and it's so infused with people's own personal biases and they don't give a shit about what's actually happening and never have. So it's like, it makes our job super easy, but at the same time, it's like, it makes our job kind of like a kind of duh. We feel like we're kind of like pointing out duh things, you know what I mean? Like, doesn't everybody know this? Shouldn't everybody know this? That I don't know. It's post-truth. We're in a post-truth era, and it's whatever you want to be true, and then fight about it.
Yeah, everybody knows, but there's no let up in propaganda. We know they're making statements, qualifying statements now to kind of prepare the ground for actually Russia won in Ukraine.
Well,
But still,
it's not just that Russia won. It's that the latest from Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General and other, at least European and Americans as well, is that they're telling everybody now that this is going to go on for years. Everybody needs to prepare themselves for years-long conflict in Ukraine. It's not going to be over, and and we all need to accept the fact that blowback from that will involve, for Western populations, European and American, will be long-term increasing increases in the price of gas and energy, electricity, and general reduction in standard of living. But that's the price to pay because
Well,
someone has to stop Putin.
Stoltenberg said that after the Washington Post cited anonymous U.S. government sources. So let's look at that first. Washington Post. There's a hell of a quote in the middle of it. They talked about. We haven't joked about it. I mean, they've said it that the U.S. government is going to fight to the last Ukrainian. Well, they have bigger plans than that. Scroll down to hunger. If you do a search for hunger, the key phrase here in the middle of this is the Washington Post last week. Is that the thing I have in? No, it might be the next iteration of it. Yeah, here we go. Even if that reality does not materialize immediately, officials have described the stakes of ensuring Russia cannot swallow up Ukraine as so high that the administration is willing to countenance even a global recession and mounting hunger.
Mm-hmm.
Is willing to countenance. Like the US is willing to what? Starve tens of millions of people?
They're willing to starve people, yeah, but it's a price that they're willing for the average American or the ordinary person in Europe and America to starve, but it's a price that they're willing to pay,
Yeah.
They won't starve, but they're willing to allow you to starve. Bo, are you okay with that?
They want to starve me.
Yeah.
Try
it.
They can try.
Yeah. It'll be hell to pay. Yeah.
And it was then today, or it was published today, that Stoltenberg, the stultifying Stoltenberg, speaks up, and he almost repeats that verbatim, because that Washington Post has an anonymous. It doesn't say who said that, but then Stoltenberg puts his face to the same term, and he says, even if the costs are high, not only for military support, also because of rising energy and food prices, we're prepared to do this for years and years and years. So. I don't know. What are they preparing people there for? Like Ukraine being a wasteland? Russia can never win because we'll just keep throwing weapons at it for years. He says.
Well, it's what they've been doing recently, and it's coincided over the past couple of weeks with the talk of them providing howitzers, longer range, kind of towed and self-propelled artillery. Can shoot shells 70, 80 miles basically, or 70 kilometers, whatever, quite a long way. And they've been using them recently. You can see the effect of them already. And this is from France, primarily from France and the US, longer range artillery for the Ukrainian military, so they can shoot at civilians basically in Donbass. So the idea is like, okay, Russia has taken kind of most of Donbass, or will soon basically finish the process of taking all of the Donbass, but in advance of that, and then going forward, the Donbass will be basically the battleground, but from a safe distance type thing, supposedly. Of course, Russia will continue to target the artillery installments and those howitzers and stuff from the air and elsewhere, but that seems to be the tactic of them right now, is that, okay, you're going to take Donbass, well, we're going to turn Donbass into a continual ongoing conflict zone, basically. From a distance, we're not going to try and retake it now, but we're going to regularly bombard it, including the civilian, mainly actually the civilian targets, civilian populations in Donbass. That's kind of war they're waging. It's bizarre because, for the whole period of this war, the Western media and governments have accused Russia of targeting, they've made much of them targeting civilians, killing Ukrainian civilians, that it's this evil barbaric war against the civilians of Ukraine, etc., etc. When in fact it was obviously the opposite, that Russia was going to significant lengths to avoid civilian, or to minimize civilian casualties to date over the past 100 days. But you see that whenever the whenever the West basically, because this is a proxy war by the US against Russia and its Western allies, when they start to basically lose, when Russia starts to make significant gains and achieve its first objectives, and its first objective was taking Donbass, then they turn around and just start shelling Donbass from indiscriminately and killing civilians.
Yeah.
The
So that
hypocrisy
seems
is
to be
crazy.
the tactic. As they retreat, they're lobbing more and more further into civilian
Well, they're
areas.
not even. Yeah, they're being pushed out as they're being pushed out of their various towns and cities.
They're being
from
whooped.
from a distance further
Yeah.
away, with the capability that the US and France and other countries are providing them with, i.e., longer range artillery. They're just firing them into those areas that have been taken from Ukraine. Like it's
Yeah.
almost like, well, if we don't have it, since we don't have it anymore, since Russia's taken it, we're just going to wipe it out in a certain sense, or we're going to blitz it.
Their lines in the rear seem to be like their psycho lines, because there's reports that they're also shooting at any of their own forces trying to retreat. So they keep them up there, and then they fire, of course, into there was the barrage of shelling took place on the 13th. It seems to be the most intensive. I'm not sure it didn't kill as many people as, say, single recent attacks like the one in Donetsk city center earlier this spring. That killed like 20 some people.
Right.
But the scale of it was huge. Ava Bartlett did a report on it, on this attack on the 13th. I think I read somewhere, I don't know what criteria they're saying, but it was the most intensive bombing in Donetsk city center yet to date, all the way back to 2014.
That's only because of the capability that they have, effectively, and again, it's a longer
That's
range
being
capability.
fed to them.
Yeah, you're talking about the Ukrainian, the forces, the Donbass forces, and the Russian military, in those areas in Donbass don't have those longer range artillery pieces, basically, because Ukraine didn't have them before, so they weren't necessary. I mean, you only put in the kind of material that you actually need. Let's say that's appropriate to your objectives, right? And what you have, right? But definitely the Ukrainians have been calling for quite a long time, for a number of weeks, for longer range artillery,
And they are
and
getting,
that's what they've
they
been
have
getting,
they
and
have
they've been using that in a way that to an effect that wasn't possible before, because they didn't have that longer range artillery. You know what I mean? They didn't have it in such quantities, and
these are modern guns. They're not just indiscriminate. You can target. They have been targeting hospitals.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what Bartlett's report. Want to listen to it? It's just 3 minutes, so it's from this week, but it's about the barrage on the 13th.
On June 13th, Ukraine unleashed a torrent of bombing all over Donetsk, killing 6 civilians, including 1 child, and injuring tens more. The Ukrainian shelling began in the morning, resumed in the afternoon, and continued heavily for another 2 hours in the evening. A deafening series of blasts throughout the city, terrorizing residents, targeting apartment buildings, civilian infrastructure, industrial buildings, a gas station, hospitals, schools, and a kindergarten. Locals say this was some of the heaviest bombing of Donetsk since 2014. The DPR's Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported such an unprecedented, in terms of power, density, and duration of fire, raid on the DPR capital was not recorded during the entire period of the armed conflict. One of the hospitals targeted was a busy maternity hospital with dozens of patients inside. Thankfully, the woman had taken shelter in the basement earlier when the shelling had started, so none of the women were killed, as they might have been if they had been in the delivery, gynecology, or other top floor departments.
So that's the roof of the maternity hospital. So now we always hear these Western reports and claims about Russian airstrikes on hospitals, which turn out to be fabrications and hoaxes. But this is an actual shell fired by Ukrainian forces that came through that gaping hole in the roof you can see over here.
One of the very few corporate media mentions of the bombings distorts public opinion with its headline, "Russian-backed separatists say." The Guardian, one day after the bombings, had the audacity to report a mere several Ukrainian strikes in the city, underreporting also the deaths and not at all mentioning the strike on the maternity hospital. Outrageously, some media even claimed on June 13th the bombings were conducted by Russia. Keep in mind, this is the same Western corporate-owned media that shrieked for weeks in March that Russia had bombed a maternity hospital in Mariupol, killing 3. The reality emerged that Ukrainian Nazi Azov forces had expelled the hospital staff in late February, so prior to the alleged strike, had militarized the hospital, and staged a hoax including setting off explosives to incriminate Russia. One of the unwilling stars of the propaganda, a young woman named Mariana, later spoke out that there was no airstrike and that she and other women were filmed without warning by journalists dressed in military uniform and wearing a helmet. Just as Western media's lack of reporting on Ukraine's bombing was to be expected, so too was the UN's weak-worded condemnation, with the spokesman for the Secretary General calling it extremely troubling. Conversely, at the time of the Mariupol hospital attack hoax, UN Secretary General emphatically tweeted, "Today's attack on a hospital in Mariupol, Ukraine, is horrific." Even now, days after Ukraine's intense bombardment of Donetsk and targeting of the maternity hospital, Western media and politicians remain silent. The suffering and deaths of the people of Donetsk doesn't fit the Western narrative, so they misreport it or simply don't report it at all, enabling Ukraine to continue to commit war crimes.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And like I said, it's it's the worst. They're reporting that it's the worst bombing of Donetsk in over the last 8 years since it started in 2014, and that's only possible because of the supply of Western equipment to the Ukrainian military. So this is basically
all the stuff they're gloating about. The recent arrivals is now doing this.
So this is the fault. That's basically the West. That's basically Russia, the US and France and the British and the Germans are directly killing civilians in Donetsk. There you go.
Hospitals.
Surprise, surprise. Well, they killed 1.5 million Iraqis, so
there's
no big deal.
The one yesterday,
To them.
there's a barrage yesterday that may turn out to be worse. And as people probably know, Patrick Lancaster, check it out. His report that's up today, he thinks it was heavier than last week's. So this looks like the new pattern.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
That's where they're going. And they're planning to do it throughout the summer, ongoing, and that's why they're talking now about it lasting years and that kind of thing. Because from their perspective, Russia isn't going to. Their new strategy is Russia isn't going to be allowed to advance further and take, more of Ukrainian territory, as has been their plan. Like we were talking previously in other shows about it being basically along the Dnieper River and across the bottom of Ukraine, like taking up, I say, a third of the country. Let's say, so it's outside. Further west of Donetsk, that they're going to stop them from doing that by bogging them down effectively in defending Donetsk under serious bombardment by the West, effectively.
There's a report today in Russian media that they hit last night with Caliber missiles the command center in the center of the country. So that's probably the command center for for these attacks on the Eastern Front in Dnipropetrovsk, the capital on the river. They say they guesstimate 50 generals and other officers killed last night in targeted strikes from Russia. So that's that's their answer, I suppose. They will try to limit or stop what they're doing.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, they're making serious headway. Like it's like this pincer movement. It's turning into a serious cauldron. Like there's so many videos last week of Yukis either fleeing or being killed. And they're starting to, they're starting to report more about their casualties. 100 a day, I think it's the official Kiev position, or 200 a day.
200 a day.
They're losing. So a little bit of more truthiness from Kiev on their losses. Also last week, 2 Americans were captured. That made some news, obviously, because they were captured and they were immediately interviewed on RT and others. But there's other stuff going on as well that is not. I've seen some gruesome footage of. You can hear by their accents they're American. Seriously wounded people being raced out in vehicles from the front line. The rumor about the 2 that in question that in the video I saw is that they made it back to an airbase, possibly in Germany. So they survived, but it's really it's what was always going to happen. This build up in Donbass. It's now getting hot, and the Russians are are cleaning up, at least in those two regions. It's surely they're going to have to. I mean, yeah, they're going to have to go further.
Who?
The Russians,
Yeah.
if they're facing like if all you do is move the front line from one point and just shift it westward, you still have, the remainder who are willing to keep shelling in on the Donbass. So,
Yep. That's the plan, yeah. So, yeah.
on the mercenaries, Russia's published its stats on how many foreign mercenaries are in the armed forces of Ukraine. It's interesting because it suggests that the Kiev and NATO numbers are inflated by a factor of 10. They're overselling it by 10. So they gave a breakdown. In total, they have a very precise number. 6,956 foreign citizens from 64 nations have arrived in Ukraine as of 2 days ago, June 17th. Almost 2,000 of those have been killed, and 1,700 have left the country since then. And then they have precise figures for each country. So, just for example, the UK, okay, they don't have a precise figure for UK, but it's like between 300 and 400. Whereas Sky News, as of yesterday, is still gloating that there are 3,000, 10 times that number of British alone in Ukraine. Like,
Well away from the front lines.
well away. It's just another useless lie, apparently. But it's probably another one to increase morale, maintain morale,
Yeah.
and encourage, I suppose, more to come.
Yeah, yeah. But most of those people are actual active military personnel, active British and American and French military personnel who are actively involved in coordinating the Ukrainian war effort. You know what I mean? They're not actually the ones you see who are captured and stuff. The have-a-go heroes and stuff. They're not actually part of any. They're going on their own kind of like initiative. But the numbers that they give, and yeah, there are probably thousands of NATO member countries military personnel in the country, but they're coordinating the movements of Ukrainian military. They're not actually engaged in the fighting themselves.
Well, the two Americans who were captured is interesting because they said they just arrived.
Yeah.
They were sent to cover a retreat,
Mm.
but they got captured,
Mm.
overrun, and captured. But one of them was active duty until March.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he went in his own steam.
Yeah.
He said this is the guy with the Vietnamese surname. The story they're putting out for him is he got engaged just before he headed to Ukraine in March. That sounds like a guy who expected to come home. And there's a rumor that he was a specialist based on Okinawa. He's not a combat. He's not usually supposed to be in combat. He's like an operator of some kind.
Mm-hmm. He's apparently a chemical warfare specialist or something like that. But I think it's possible that I don't think they're not putting any great. There's not detachments or battalions of
Right.
NATO member personnel actually actively involved because, that would be way too much. The Russians would obviously end up killing a large number of them or capturing a large number of them, and there would be clearly active duty personnel, and that would just be too much of a propaganda coup for Russia. So the West isn't going to do that. So most of these guys who are being captured, and there's only a handful that have-a-go heroes. Like one of them, the beardy guy who was caught along with that other guy. He apparently his mom was interviewed by CNN or something. She said that he went because he believed that if Russia wasn't stopped in Ukraine, it would eventually come to America.
Right.
So that's the kind of level of ignorance that you have amongst those kind of people. People who are just completely, inured in the propaganda. They're not very intelligent people, basically.
But he's now telling RT, well, since I've been captured, I learned there's two sides to the story.
Right? Yeah. Of course, he's going to say that. Right? Yeah. Like the other two English guys who have been sentenced to death actually in Donbass. They're very contrite, now they've seen the light, and I didn't realize, and I was lied to.
It'll be interesting if that sentence is carried, or if they're bargained.
Yeah. In other major news, Joe Biden fell off a bike. What's your take on that, Bo? Is it?
Well, it's
Bo's American, so
Yeah.
he's well positioned to give us a lowdown on this.
Well, before even the fact that he fell off his bike, which I think most people know about by now, because
Yeah.
it spread like wildfire. Just the fact that they decided to set up this like sort of photo op of
right where he cycles 100 yards.
yeah.
Um,
It's like, oh, Joey got a new bike for Christmas, like a
Right.
10-year-old. Let's take him out and show him off,
Yeah.
and then everyone can see that he's like a living, breathing human, not just a figurehead.
Right.
But then he goes and tries
Falls
to get
off.
off his bike and just stumbles to the ground, and
Yeah.
all their efforts were foiled, which was pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, it didn't go
watch.
quite as they planned. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's amazing. Just browsing the news yesterday, whatever it was like fairly high up on the BBC and CNN. Joe Biden falls off bike.
Do you
Like,
wanna-
old man falls off bike?
Does anyone want to watch it?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, is there? Where's
Yeah.
that? Where's that one? Or there's better ones though.
There's a good one that shows Kamala Harris with a screwdriver sticking it into the spokes of the
I don't think I have that.
yeah.
It's not. I mean, I don't know. Is it? Yeah.
This is just straight up footage. Hi, everybody. Hello, hello, fellow citizens. Here I am.
Oh.
See, I'm like you. I fall down too. Were you saying that he had like clip-on shoes on his pedal?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
was
So he stopped and
It's a bad idea.
That was not a good idea.
He was like going to the side to try and put his foot down, and he couldn't get it out of the shoe pedal thingy,
Yeah.
which is funny.
Yeah. People are saying that it's just a good image for
Oh,
it's this is the like this picture of the fall is defining really it's a good picture that sums up where America's at under Joe Biden.
well, even more ridiculously, there was an Atlantic headline from today called "The Heroism of Biden's Bike Fall."
I think that's
heroic.
I think that's goofed.
Is
I searched for the headline. Somebody has. It's a bit like the old Guardian meme generator. You could generate any headline for the Guardian, as absurd as you want. And they sued actually to have that website shut down. There's something similar for the Atlantic. So someone generated that headline, but it is exactly the kind of thing you're going to see
Yeah, I
for
mean,
commentary on it.
Yeah, it can be totally real or totally fake, and either way, you feel like that's something the Atlantic would do.
Looking at his shoes there, he's not wearing like biker clip-on shoes.
Right?
He's-
No.
No, it's the
Might have
They're
been
not
like the
pedals.
the thing
thing
you
on
put
the
your
pedal,
foot,
but
your foot into.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. It captures the
No, they're not
toes.
clip on. Yeah, it's just that
Like
the ones that hold the front of your foot. You slide your foot into them. They're pedals with a little cage for the front of your foot.
Yeah.
So he just wasn't able to.
Pull out in time.
Couldn't finagle his little feetsies out of that thing.
Yeah.
Poor guy.
There's a video of him like this week running to the Air Force One chopper across the White House lawn. Like he's like waves goodbye, and then he starts to just jog. It's still really slow. It's slower than people walk. But
Yeah.
he's there's a serious news about the Bidens though this week. This was so out there that when it was first published, we decided not to publish it because we thought, this is it's unverifiable. Who knows? It was like one of those, like the National Conservative blog. Even it wasn't a big news website. I think it was that Raheem guy's blog. He first mentioned it 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the FBI raided O'Keefe's Project Veritas because he come in possession of Joe Biden's daughter's diary. That's now been verified this last week. It's no longer a rumor because the British Daily Mail had it leaked to them, and they went public with some of his contents.
Pretty awful.
So that's her diary. We know that's her. Well, we know that's her diary because Joe Biden's FBI and Department of Justice did raids on O'Keefe and on the woman who's now outed by them, as having found it when she was staying at a halfway house after recovering from rehab for drug addiction problems, like her brother, right?
Yep.
This woman is now outed. She's like in Florida or something, Palm Beach, Florida. They've since arrested her. I don't know if she's currently under arrest, but I don't know. Tucker Carlson did a full monologue on it, like last night or 2 nights ago. It was like 20 minutes on the diary.
Mhm.
It's bad. It's really bad. Basically, she's like, she herself didn't say, "Daddy molested me," but she said, matter of factly, "I'm wondering, like now, kind of like in hindsight, if the showers I had with Dad when I was a little girl probably weren't appropriate."
This is who
His daughter,
Biden's daughter.
Biden's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's because she's dealing with a lot of like issues related to sexuality and like
Sex addiction.
promiscuity and everything, and so that's the context of.
It's funny
that
Biden
statement.
produces 2 children like that. You know what I mean? One Hunter. Well, obviously he produced more, but those 2, you know, yeah, says a lot. You know, tells you a lot about who Biden is. Probably
Both with severe drug addiction problems.
weird.
Both with severe sex addiction problems, and both. I mean, in both cases, it was 2020. Yeah, 2 years ago, I got that right. 2020, when it was first surfaced. Of course, they killed it because 2020 was election year, right? Just like Hunter's laptop. And then 2 years later, the Daily Mail speaks up, and the Daily Mail has a relationship with the New York Post or the New York Daily News or something. I think it's co-owned. It's the same outlet, and that's the place where anything and everything on Epstein, specifically Epstein and his relationship with Prince Andrew, was leaked. It was always came to the Daily Mail. So I wonder if there's a bit of like, you know, background pressure being applied here as well on the Bidens and the president specifically.
Well, yeah. Well, they didn't need to, but yeah, Biden was a dyed-in-the-wool kind of. He was only too happy to. He was vice president for 8 years. You know what I mean? And a senator for how long? Like
Right, he's
3
there, man.
centuries.
Yeah.
He was very well aware of what the job of POTUS was, which is ride a bike and fall off it.
Yeah, just be a figurehead and
Right.
take orders from
Right.
from the people who really control things.
He knows how it works. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose then it's controlled release because it's out there. It can be used. Yeah. Can it though? In this day and age, like we've seen it all now. The son of the president smokes a crack pipe, and there's photos of him all over the web with hookers.
He
Allegedly, some of the photos. I don't know if anyone's seen them. Did they ever make it online? Some of the photos are like with him with his underage niece.
oh, I didn't see that.
Right. And other child porn issues
Mm-hmm.
on that laptop, you know.
Yeah.
But life carries on.
Well, and he birthed a child with one of the strippers that he hooked up with.
That's fact, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Nice family.
Yeah. January 6th insurrection. Were you there, Bo?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay, you are possibly one of the insurrectionists. Maybe the FBI want to talk to you
Maybe.
about that. They had some. We talked about it last week because I think it was started last week. The hearings. Is that what it's called? The hearings. There were kind of hearings or something. January 6th inquiry.
They managed to finagle a House Select Committee,
Yeah, like
Right.
a
which
committee.
is of like church fame, you know, back in the 70s, which was always a bombshell. They couldn't have a normal procedure Senate hearing because you'd have to have both parties present. So it was a Democrat-controlled.
Yeah, just to not actually talk about what happened, but to talk about
restate the narrative about what happened.
Yeah, and that it was an attack on our democracy, an insurrection. It was an attempted. They were going to wage a full ground war in America. It was an attempt to overthrow the government. It was an attempt. It was a coup, basically. Blah blah blah. Which
There's a specific target here. They want to indict Trump again
Yeah.
so that he cannot
So
run
he
in
can't run,
2024.
Yeah. But and the real story behind it obviously is not discussed as in terms of how it actually happened, what was actually going on. It wasn't obviously an insurrection. There's no planned kind of like takeover of the government of the country, whatever. It's just a bunch of people who ended up getting into the
Who were let in by the Capitol Police.
yes, sorry, let in. So, but there's been very little on that except Ted Cruz actually. I don't know if this was actually at the hearings, but it was sometime recently. Ted Cruz at some kind of hearing, whatever, asked some pertinent questions from the FBI, and their answers are really interesting. Have a listen.
I want to turn to the FBI. How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Ms. Sadburn, who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
Except it's all over the
there are
web.
a lot of people who are understandably very concerned about Mr. Epps. On the night of January 5th, 2021, Epps wandered around the crowd that had gathered, and there's video out there of him chanting, "Tomorrow, we need to get into the Capitol, into the Capitol." This was strange behavior, so strange that the crowd began chanting, "Fed, Fed, 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 Fed." Ms. Sandburn, was Ray Epps a Fed?
Sir, I cannot answer that question.
The next day, on January 6th, Mr. Epps is seen whispering to a person, and 5 seconds later, 5 seconds after he's whispering to a person, that same person begins to forcibly tear down the barricades. Did Mr. Epps urge them to tear down the barricades?
Sir,
Crickets.
similar to the other answers, I cannot answer that.
She can't say no to any of those questions, right? Can't say no categorically, which means...
Because she incriminates herself in any future.
Perjury.
Huh?
Perjury.
But if the answer is no, then she won't incriminate herself.
Well, no. If she says no,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And the
And
answer
the-
is no. If the truth is no,
Exactly.
then she won't perjure herself.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
That's why
So
I'd say that.
that's guilty. Then that's
To any rational person,
yeah.
all of the answers to those questions are yes. To Ted Cruz's questions are yes, or in the affirmative, yes. Yes, FBI agents engaged in encouragement or incitement to violence. They engaged in acts of violence, and they did know who Ray Epps was, and he was probably an FBI informant, and he was there to engage in and encourage the crowd, or try and get the crowd to get into the Capitol building. So it was all basically, it was an FBI terror plot. Without the terrorism, it was an FBI insurrection plot. And designed specifically to, at the last gasp, to kind of, seal the deal on Trump as this kind of would-be dictator or whatever, And frequently, I remember what he called Chuck Schumer talking about it. It's probably like the only time that I've ever heard. There's probably other examples from history or whatever, but in recent years and in this context, it's the only time I've heard anybody in the know actually admit what everybody should know at this stage, which is that Biden or whoever's in the White House, with the exception of Trump, and I can explain that in a minute, but Biden and all other presidents, at least since JFK, have been figureheads and have not run the country. That there's people behind the scenes who have run the country. And this is Chuck Schumer back in 2000, I don't know what it was.
16.
Was it 2016? Yeah.
Yeah.
Or 2017 maybe. Talking about Trump. He was responding here on, was the Rachel Maddow show or something? Or MSNBC anyway. Rachel Maddow show, answering her question about, or answering to the point that Trump had decided to cancel his intelligence right from the get-go, cancel his intelligence briefings, because I don't need any information from those people. And obviously, it's not that he didn't need it. He had obviously at that point already got a read on the intelligence briefings that they were all very slanted and basically were talking points for him. There were stuff for him. Just read this, sir. Even if you don't agree with it, this is what's actually happening. This is what you need to say. And he decided fairly early on that he didn't want to just read from some stupid script that
They'd
they were
already
providing him.
sicked Russiagate on him.
Exactly. So he
during
knew
the
what was
campaign.
going on, right? So, and Chuck Schumer to play that there.
But he's taking these shots, this antagonism, this taunting to the
Let me
intelligence
tell
community.
you take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you. So even for a practical, supposedly hard-nosed businessman, he's being really dumb to do this.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated
I don't know,
to?
but from what I am
Yeah, you
told,
do.
they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
Intelligence community holds the power, therefore, is what he's basically saying. The intelligence community has 6 ways from Sunday to get back at you, and in the ensuing years after that, so that was like 2017, maybe, or 2016, 17, they showed the various different ways that they had to get back, the 6 ways from Sunday that they had to get back at him, which was to make up all sorts of smear campaigns and mobilize the establishment, the government, U.S. government establishment, the Washington establishment apparatus to attack him and smear him and hobble his entire presidency. And they had the ability to do that. They had the ability effectively to mostly neuter a sitting president in terms of his ability to do anything, do what he supposedly, whatever he supposedly thinks the president of the U.S. is able to do, which is to run the country, right, make all the decisions. He's the decider in chief, famously quoted by or stated by George W. Bush. He's the decider, and he gets to decide things, and he runs the country. Apparently not. If you don't do what the intelligence community, i.e. the Washington establishment, the deep state, wants you to do, then you're screwed. You have to. That's the bottom line. The POTUS is supposed to do what he is told, not what he wants to do. And Trump's big sin was to decide to try and go, okay, so it says I'm the commander-in-chief, I get to make decisions? Okay, I make decisions, yes? No, you're a Russian agent. You love Vladimir Putin. There were prostitutes peeing on you in beds in Moscow. You are trying to take over the country. You're Hitler. You're an insurrectionist. Oh, look at all those people, all those white supremacists that you're leading, the Proud Boys. You're a racist, and that's the end of your presidency. Thank you very much. Next, Joe Biden. Fell off a bike.
This is a great recap of 5 years there.
Yeah.
There you go. That's pretty much...
Well, there was a specific need at the time as well. I think it's touch and go whether or not any of the courts would have heard the election claims. Because, 25 some states in the end petitioned to have recounts and or hearings into claims of fraud, which would have forced, discovery evidence would have been brought forward. But all courts shut down in that period. And,
COVID was very useful, yeah.
COVID was useful, but this put a massive cloud over it. Now, at this point, having done January 6th, you can go to any Supreme Court justice and say, if you listen to this at all, if you give any kind of countenance to this at all, we're looking at civil war in this country.
Yeah, well, that was what they're told. The three or four Supreme Court justices who were deliberating over whether or not to hear the case for, to hear the evidence for election rigging in 2020. There's hearsay, anecdotal. Someone inside the Justice Department heard them in a room, and basically the message was they were discussing whether or not to hear it, and the response from one of the justices, I can't remember his name, but one of them basically just drew the line under it and said, listen, if you want to do this, if we are to hear this case, which suggests that it had some merit, then we're looking at civil war. Do you want to be responsible for that? No? Okay, no case. There is no case. So we decide there's no case here because the outcome will be civil war. Now, would it? I don't know. Would they believe in their own narrative, the narrative that had been given to them, that it would cause a civil war if the election was overturned? I don't know. But I don't think there were enough people, motivated people, Hillary supporters or anti-Trumpers in America to actually mount any kind of a civil war.
No.
You might have had disturbances. You might have had riots.
No, but you would have had the IC, the intelligence community.
Well, stoking it, Black Lives Matter, riots, that kind of thing. It would have been a bit, it would have been.
They would have gone full color revolution.
Yeah, but it wouldn't have been. It probably would. They basically had no balls. Basically, I would have just, if I was a Supreme Court justice, right, Bo? If you were a Supreme Court justice, you would have just taken that and said, listen, we'll work it out. Martial law, whatever needed for a few weeks, we'll shut it down, and then we'll get on with things. It'll be a flash in the pan.
Buildings burned down.
Yeah. A few buildings burned down, a few cities, put the police in, whatever. You have maybe a couple of months or something, but it'll run its course as everything does. It's not going to be the end of the country, right?
Yeah. I wonder if they're starting to have regrets after what happened the last few weeks.
Well, that was their out. The Supreme Court said, they say, oh, it's going to be a civil war. Okay, then we won't touch it.
Right.
They gave us a good
They're
excuse.
scared. And obviously they were getting that from, the Supreme Court justices were getting that from the intelligence community. Those 6 ways from Sundays boys, they're the ones who are putting the fear of God in them, basically.
Look what's happened since over this abortion issue in the States. The Biden himself has tacitly encouraged, along with other Democrat leaders, people to go protest at their homes. Someone leaked where they live. There's been death threats against them. That's why I wonder, like, are they starting to regret, like, because even when they gave everything for the service of the greater good, you know, 2 years later, they're like locked in their homes.
Yeah.
Kavanaugh.
Death threats.
They had the assassin or death threat against Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
And like nobody in the media covered that at all.
Right.
And imagine if the script had flipped a little, what the media would have done. One of our beloved, liberal people is getting attacked, assassinated. It'd be all over the news.
Yep. Yeah. So this week also, Fed increased interest rates by 0.75%. I think that brings it up to 1.5%. That's just overall general lending between financial institutions interest rate, which puts up the cost of basically borrowing and exchange, lending, etc., between banking institutions, financial institutions, etc. But that then is it follows on to interest rates on the housing market, for example. Mortgage interest rates are something like 7-8% now or something like that in the US. So it seems that there's an economic food bar coming in that respect. How long it'll take, we don't know, but definitely the housing market is pretty wobbly in the US and in Europe, but particularly in the US it's pretty bad. I mean, those interest rates have been kept artificially low, and it's at the point where they can no longer keep them artificially low, so they've had to increase them as a result of inflation, which is a result of, well, what's inflation caused by? Putin did it all, right? Putin's the cause of inflation. Nothing to do with COVID, 2 years locking down the entire economy of the globe, and then having a war.
And printing money.
And printing money like there's no tomorrow, with nothing to back it up. But it's all Putin's fault, supposedly. But I think there could be a kind of housing issue, a housing bubble, similar, not exactly the same, but similar to 2008, basically, where because those interest rates on mortgages, because the Fed sets the interest rate and because they've kept them artificially low, the interest rates on mortgages have been very low, which means that over the past few years, a lot of people have been buying houses that they can't really afford. That causes so a lot more buying up of houses means increased demand, which means house prices go higher, so people end up buying houses that are overpriced, basically. And eventually leads to a kind of a readjustment when those people can't, some of them default on their mortgages, all that kind of stuff. People sell their houses up, stops going bankrupt. Then house prices collapse again because there's a dumping of houses onto the market, which means there's no longer a supply problem. There's oversupply, which means house prices collapse. Everybody's still holding onto their houses that they bought at inflated prices. Their houses are now worth a lot less than they were before, and they kind of go bankrupt. And of course, big investment corporations and stuff. What do you call those two groups that we talk about now and again? BlackRock and Vanguard. Groups like that are buying into the property market all the time, and they can have a big influence on the property market by basically either buying a large amount of property or dumping a large amount of property to mess with the price and stuff. So that's one thing I think that's definitely, it's going to be part of the upcoming in the near future, and we're not going to give an exact date or whatever, but or time frame, but in the near future, some kind of an economic crunch, let's say.
Check out what the head of JP Morgan said this week, Jamie Dimon. I just sent it to Scotty. I mean, we used to be like, what, catastrophists. This is the head of JP Morgan, NBC last week. Jamie Dimon says, brace yourself for an economic hurricane caused by the Fed and Ukraine war.
Quantitative tightening, two main causes. Quantitative tightening, i.e. standing back on the money printing, which they've been going at like crazy for quite a long time. So it's scheduled to begin this month.
And the other one, the rising cost of commodities, food and fuel.
Yeah, 95 billion a month in reduced bond holdings. Well, the other large factor worrying them is Ukraine war and impact on commodities, including food and fuel. Oil could hit 150, 175 a barrel. You better brace yourself.
Scroll down to the first few paragraphs. Diamond says he's prepping the biggest U.S. bank for an economic hurricane on the horizon and advised investors to do the same. You know, I said the storm clouds, but I'm going to change it. It's a hurricane. You'd better brace yourself. JP Morgan is bracing ourselves. And we're going to be very conservative with our balance sheet. Yeah, I don't think, retooling your balance sheet is going to help much. But that does beg the question, what do they have on those balance sheets now after 2008? Because they all got caught with their pants down with subprime mortgages.
Well, but similar in terms of subprime. They have a lot of subprime mortgages on there, or it's more like, yeah, they're subprime mortgages. Not necessarily that they've been trading them, because I think they learned that lesson, at least to some extent, in 2008. But they've been selling the housing market, like I just said, is because of interest rates being low. It's been booming. People have been buying houses like there's no tomorrow, beyond their means, basically, because interest rates are low, right? They've been able to buy them, but now the interest rates are going up, right? So the Fed is putting interest rates up, which means your monthly payments on that mortgage are beyond your ability to meet them. You go bankrupt, you dump your house back in the market, and then suddenly the whole thing turns around, and you have a kind of crash, basically. And it's just going to be part of a crash, I think, because, like he said, there's going to be commodity issues, food, supply chain issues, energy issues, the price of energy, the price of gas, the price of diesel, the price of petrol, the price of those three, and electricity, obviously. So yeah, it all seems to be gearing up towards something pretty nasty in the near future, and I think we'll just have to get through this summer. It's going to be kind of fairly, it'll build steam over the summer, and then into the winter you're going to be seeing some pretty nasty things. So people need to.
I mean, if you see 10,000 cattle die again, like they just did, a couple more of those.
Right, that was kind of interesting. Yeah.
So
was there any follow-up on that? They said, the heat.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a number of like farmers or people from that area that were, interviewed and talked to, and like some of them actually believe that there was some foul play involved, that maybe it was poisoning, something like that. And then there's a lot of farmers that say, and I think it might be more correct to say that there's some extreme weather that was led to this, where like normally like at night the temperature goes down to the point where these cattle can cool down, and it didn't do that. In fact, the temperature spiked, which is abnormal at night, even in the middle of summer. And so all these cattle just kind of drop dead from the heat. And if that happens a few more times, price of meat, price of beef,
So it could have been a natural event, but it's something else to compound food supply issues.
Yeah, right. Natural and maybe not so natural, an unnatural weather event instead
right.
of
Unusual.
like a foul play caused by humans or something like that.
Yeah, but it's amazing how suspicious people are about it. Like all over Twitter, it's like, really another issue? Because check out this latest one. This is a report from USA Today, I think. I just sent it to you, Scott. Another major fire at a food processing plant.
Yeah.
Headline is Stevens Point Journal. I don't know where that is, but Wisconsin, is it?
Maybe.
Your home state.
Yeah.
Headline: 70 firefighters battle blaze at Festive Foods frozen pizza plant in Portage County as Red Cross volunteers provide support. The scale of this plant, it's like provides like frozen pizza and other frozen goods all over the country.
Mm-hmm. And there's been a number of these processing plants that's happened to.
That's around 100 since late 2021. 100, and I have a list. We'll flick through it here. This is from Zero Hedge, which got it from Gateway Pundit. What's interesting about this list, if you could find it it's embedded in here somewhere. I think it's about midway down. There they are, numbered. One begins late 2021. Okay, I suppose you have to start somewhere. Maybe how do you base your criteria? Are there suspicions for all of them? I'm not sure. I think what the commonality is that they're large food processing plants. And it goes down and down and down. And especially I noticed since March this year, there have been about 80. So there's a list of 94 here. There have been some more since then. So it's around 100. But 4/5 of them are just in the last 3 months.
In the U.S. alone?
In the U.S. alone.
Wow.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's that story, that idea of food processing plants being burning down or going out of for whatever reason, shutting down and stuff is a lot of them burning down, or catching on fire. It's been around so much that I can't remember which mainstream media outlet actually did a segment on it to kind of debunk it and saying, no, there's like 36,000 food processing plants across the US, and every year or something like, there's some incident at something like 5,000 of them or something like that. So it's not something that's
Okay.
an issue now. I don't know. I mean, maybe that's true, but the problem is, from whatever's causing those fires. I mean, if that's a high, it sounds like a high 5,000 out of 36,000. That's like what, like 15%, but 15% of them every year have some incident, that kind of shuts them down. That's pretty bad when all of the other conditions that are prevailing today that are exacerbating it are in play.
Everything's tight as it is.
Yeah, it's difficult.
One more thing
balance.
just makes it,
Yeah.
Which, of course, again speaks to the lockdowns being insane. We already lived in a tight system, so the stress that put on it was nuts.
And it's also the context for why some people think that these cattle dying could be related to foul play because of the connection.
What it speaks to, like, we'd have to do a long analysis, right, to find out if that number of plants burning down or having other technical issues is normal. Okay, so you'd need to find a background figure. But I think what it speaks to, at the very least, is that it's on people's minds.
Yeah.
They notice them, and then they start to tabulate. They pay attention to it. Like a video of the 10,000 cattle goes up, and everyone's like up in arms because they already know in their minds it's tight.
Things are bad already, yeah.
And they don't want this to be making it any worse.
Well,
It could just be a normal, regular, overall occurrence that kind of happens now and then.
Mm-hmm.
But it speaks to people's fears.
If you're in the U.S. and you go to the store, you go to a Dollar General or some of these places, and you look at how empty the shelves are, and lots of them, and that's what a lot of people see, and they go there, they're like, oh, like even me, like I go get something, it's not there, whereas 2-3 years ago it was always there.
Mm-hmm.
So you noticed that?
Oh, absolutely. Even where I'm at, and that's not a big city, but you see people posting these shelf pictures on social media, the shelves at their grocery store, anywhere, especially big cities where they're just like completely cleaned out and not getting restocked.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't even get into like the whole baby formula shortage thing that people are kind of upset about because they stopped importing them from Europe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's not just that. It's like, what did I just send you there, Scotty? I think I sent you the cattle one, did I?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we don't need to see the cattle. Well, put it up there just for reference. That's just the video of that was on one ranch alone, 3,000 cattle. I think in total in that area was 10,000 cattle. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But again, as things get worse and there's chaos around the planet and chaos in society and stuff, and the weather isn't cooperating, basically, we were talking about this, Bo, like basically the possibility that it's. I mean, when you have animals like that aren't free to look after themselves, effectively, they've been brought up
to find shade
in that environment, they're corralled in a certain area, whatever, and then the weather stops playing ball, basically playing nicely, and you have extreme weather and very weird weather. I think in that case you were saying that it was like there was reports that the temperature actually spiked in the middle of the night, and from what it was during the day, it actually got hotter during the night. You start getting weird stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just gonna. I mean, in that sense, farm cattle or animal raising
on these massive,
it's very finely balanced.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It needs very specific conditions. It's set out in such a way that everything has to work in this particular order, or something's going to go bad
if something
in
breaks.
one way or another. But
those cattle ranches there, where they have cities of cows like in one place, what if something goes wrong in that one area? The whole country is held hostage by the situation. It's
yeah.
I've been reading about a book about the end of Rome, and something that the guy hammers home over and over is the degree. It's hard for people to really. The only comparison they have is today. It's Rome, right? It's 1,000, 2,000 years ago officially. His point was simple, though. the degree of specialization. Like only a part of the pottery would be made here, and then it was shipped from Spain to Italy for further production. Only a part of the weapons were made here, and then it was shipped to Gaul, France today. Like they had the same kind of thing. It was probably a factor in what made it so successful as a civilization, but then also what compounded its end, its demise. Because the degree of specialization is an awesome thing,
And
but when
you
it
don't mess
breaks,
with
it's broken.
Well, when it breaks, and also you don't mess with it. And what they've done over the past 2 years, especially with COVID, they messed with it in a very significant way, and they're continuing to mess with it now in terms of like the food, the literally the energy that keeps all of that going is gas and oil, fossil fuels basically. And they've been talking over and over again about how, obviously over the past number of years in particular, about how they have to get rid of that essential ingredient that allows the glorious Western civilization to keep functioning. Fossil fuels. It's built on fossil fuels. And you know what? We're just going to get rid of them all. Overnight almost, within the next 8 years. By 2030, boom, all gone. Really? I mean, that sounds like a plan. Somebody has a conscience. And any rational person would say, listen, if you do that, you're going to cause massive problems for the very fabric of Western civilization or global civilization, because most of the globe is built on that now. And why would you do that? I mean, in best case scenario, you're gonna cause serious food supply problems, and in terms of, and also in terms of people's just standard of living, you're going to decrease people's standard of living. In a worst case scenario, you're going to probably cause the deaths of large and hundreds of millions of people. I'm talking about here. So, are we to assume that nobody's ever mentioned that to these people who are planning this?
Yeah,
they know.
I mean, the Russians are screaming it at them, huh?
They know. They know that there's not enough wind and
sun to replace
fossil fuels. They know.
Are they that psycho, or are they so? Is it more like hubris that they think they can control and manage a controlled implosion, and that people, if they do it in the right way, there'll still be enough of everything, so that you don't get bread riots.
No, there's no way. That's what I'm saying. There's no way anybody, and people have said this, that it's not possible. Even, like, I mean, you could see it's called bias, but like spokespeople or people who are part of that fossil fuel industry have said, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, I think the Saudis said it recently, they cast serious doubt on the idea that you can get rid of fossil fuels. Now, you could say the Saudis have a lot invested in that not happening, right? But other people who are a bit more like less can be accused of being so biased have said exactly the same thing. And it seems, I mean, you can do the numbers yourself, I mean, none of us have done the numbers, but other people have done the numbers, and it's like, you just can't replace the energy produced by the burning of fossil fuels with the current situation, the current supply from solar and wind. Especially, like we've said before, last year the UK, which that gets about 11% or something of its electricity every year from wind turbines, had a shortfall last year and had to import some of its electricity because the wind didn't blow strong enough. So, I mean, solar is one thing. You can say, well, we can rely on the sun, general patterns of sunshine being consistent, although that's not necessarily true either. But the wind? Really? How are you going to control the wind? How are you going to... Really? I mean, I know they would say that there's a consistent amount of wind, there's traditional winds and all that kind of stuff, but last year it didn't blow strong enough. By the British government's own admission, it didn't blow strong enough, and we had a significant shortfall in the amount of electricity that's supplied by our wind turbines. I mean, the Russians are, and again, you could accuse the Russians of being biased, but just throw that one up, Scotty, the Russians have been saying this repeatedly, and this isn't the first time, but they've said it again. The Russian oil chief said the EU is committing energy suicide, shooting themselves in the foot by imposing restrictions on Russia. Europe is committing energy suicide by imposing sanctions on Russia. The EU states lose their identity and competitive power to the US, which is interesting because the US seems to be behind this push to get Europe to divest from Russian energy supplies because Russia bad and because Ukraine. But the real reason being, we don't want Europe dependent, as we talked about repeatedly. The Americans, the Washington deep state, the people who actually run America have for a long time had a serious problem with Europe being in any way dependent on Russian energy supplies. So anything that comes along or any moves they can make to weaken or reduce or destroy Europe's dependency on Europe's reliance on Russian energy supplies is good for America, because the Americans think they can cash in by supplying all their oil and gas. Except the Biden administration isn't allowing or isn't following or isn't pushing for an increase in production of fossil fuels in America, because
They could
we
be cashing
because we got to green the whole economy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, Europe, you need to stop being reliant on Russian oil and gas, and you need to transfer your reliance to us, to America, on our oil and gas. But we're not going to produce anymore. Does that sound okay to you? All right, thanks. That sounds like a great fucking deal. Let's go. Where do I sign for that?
And
Yeah.
And then there are things to help it along. I mentioned last week the Freeport incident. Freeport is the major LNG terminal in the Gulf of Mexico. I got it wrong, actually. I said that about a third of the cargoes that leave Freeport, Louisiana, go to Europe. Since March, they reprioritized cargo shipping. I've got an industry analysis that says 68% of American LNG that's shipped out of this major terminal is the EU to make up for. But a small update, the plant has now announced it doesn't expect to resume full operations until late 2022.
Right.
When it happened, they said it'll be 3 weeks, and they were already like, "Oh, that's going to produce several billion less in storage this winter for Europe."
Mm-hmm.
Now you're talking about like months. There isn't going to be hardly any gas in storage in Europe this winter.
Yeah, they're already tapping into it. Right now, Europeans are, for the first time ever, tapping into their reserves in the summer.
Right.
The reserves that are meant to be there for winter. Just go back to that RT article, Scotty, because just on the Rosneft chief, he says, third part of down. He said also that sanctions have done away with the green transition, as the EU leaders no longer need it for market manipulation, since more blunt and radical approaches are being applied. The Russians just come out and say obvious facts, screamingly obvious facts, that this green transition that they've been talking about is complete and utter horseshit, because they've never intended it for it to actually follow it, because, as we've just said, it's not possible. It doesn't work. You can't transition to green energy because you cannot replace oil and gas, fossil fuels, with solar and wind right now, and the infrastructure they have, and it would take a very long time if it was ever possible to do that. So they've never been serious about it. And he says the green transition is just being done away with because they no longer need it for market manipulation. The only reason they ever talked about green transition was for market manipulation, nothing to do with saving the planet or stopping global warming. And now they use more blunt and radical approaches, which is, provoke Russia to do something about Ukraine in order to protect itself, and then use Russia's invasion of Ukraine in order to force European countries to back away from Russian oil and gas, to cut off Russian oil, basically stop paying for it. And then it's kind of like, more or less the way some of them have done it anyway, is like saying, yeah, we're not going to pay you, Russia, because we're not allowed to, because America won't allow us to pay for your gas, but you better keep giving us gas. And then Russia says, no, if you don't pay us for the gas, we're not giving you any. And they say, see, we always knew Russia was going to use its gas for manipulation. They're just trying to manipulate us. And America says, see, this is what we've been talking about all the time. We knew Russia was going to do this. We knew Russia wouldn't give you free gas. How evil is that? Imagine how evil it is not to give somebody free stuff. In Biden's America, that is evil.
There's some schizophrenic stuff at work as well. Like in the recent weeks, we reported that Finland just stopped paying for the gas that comes through a pipeline from Russia. So Russia went, okay, no gas, you got to pay. And then Finnish and Western media went, oh, Russia cut off the gas to Finland. See, right? Now they're buying LNG from Russia,
right? Which
is more expensive.
Yeah.
Because they're schizophrenic, because there's a real politics. They're looking at their accounts and going, we don't have enough. Winter's coming. Okay, let's just buy it on the QT, but we're going to give Russia more money so that we don't give them money for the previous contract price.
Yeah, we had to look at our balance sheets. We had to look at at how much gas. We assume that like the German, or in particularly Germany or Italy, or in the Baltic states, they actually had their finance ministers had to actually look at the numbers, because he didn't know that like some of the Baltic states get 100% of their gas from Russia? Yeah, we didn't know that. We had to check. Holy shit, we get 100% of our gas from Russia. It's like, well, we're too late. We already fucked off Russia. And then
Miko, I was just on Wikipedia. Did you know 100% of our gas is from... Are we sure we want to do this?
No, we already did it. It's too late.
Oh, it's done. Okay, well, Slava Ukraina.
Yeah. Glory to Ukraine.
Let's send them helmets.
And they're doing it all for Ukraine. Go to the JPEG I just showed you there, Scotty, or sent you, Scotty. This is Germany, who is it? Whatever, Minister for Economic Affairs.
Nuts.
They said they'll adopt emergency measures to ensure its energy needs are met after the drop in supply of Russian gas. Not the drop in supply of Russian gas, i.e. we cut it off. Yeah. We told them, don't want your gas no more. That's called a drop in supply. Including,
shit happens.
And the way they're going to replace it is increased use of coal. Coal being
fossil fuel.
The one thing that the green nut jobs absolutely needed to stop production of, including in Germany at their, the COP 26, whatever, in Glasgow, driving electric cars, saying we need to cut out, blaming China for its burning of coal and stuff. And yet now they unilaterally cut off Russian gas, which is relatively clean, and are forced to start burning far more coal. To reduce gas consumption, less gas must be used to generate electricity. Coal-fired power plants will have to be used more instead. In addition, an auction model for the sale of gas to manufacturers is to be launched in summer, intended to encourage industrial gas consumers to save gas, which is then to be stored. Coal-fired power plants that are currently only operating to a limited extent will soon be shut down or are in reserve or to be used to supply energy. So we're not going to shut down our coal-fired power plants. We're going to crank them back up again because, well, and why? Because Ukraine? To save Ukraine? Is that what it's about? Bleeding hearts for Ukraine? That's really what it's about? They're doing all of this they're going to like impoverish the German people. They're going to force the German people to freeze, to take a cold shower and say, take that, Putin.
And all to light tea candles.
And to light tea lights and stuff to keep warm. And all of it because they're so bleedy hearty about Ukraine. They're willing to possibly cause mass social unrest in their country in order to save Ukraine. That's the narrative, right?
That's
and we're meant to believe
the
it.
Truth in post-truth world. Yeah, you're invited to believe it.
Invited.
These governments were people. If these governments were people, you'd lock them up.
Yeah. What were you saying, Scotty?
I like how they talk about Germany. Oh yeah, we're going to use coal.
Yeah.
Well, you know who actually produces the most coal globally?
China.
3.7 trillion tons.
And uses it.
And they use a lot of it. And second after China is India at 761 billion tons. So China produces over 5 times more than India. And number 3 is the United States at 728 billion tons. So of course Germany will say, we'll just use coal because guess who's going to sell them coal? Or who says that they're going to sell them coal? The United States of America, except they're in the shit too. Or they will be. So, yeah. And number 4 is Australia.
We'll go green and freeze.
Yeah.
Australia is talking about limiting exports because they need it all as well.
Yeah.
And I know people are encouraged to not... Just throw up that one I just sent you, Scotty. I know people are encouraged to not listen to anything the Russians say because everything the Russians say is a lie. But this is Russia's vice premier and former energy minister, Alexander Novak, said on Friday that gas prices in the EU will remain high for several more years and warned of serious problems across Europe when the autumn-winter period starts. So there you go. But that's a lie. There's no evidence for that at all. But we can look back at that later this year and see if it comes true. But if it does come true, it'll be Russia's fault because they have deliberately prevented European people from getting access to heat because their government had the audacity. And the only reason that Russia stopped European people from getting access to energy supplies is because European governments merely asked Russia to supply it for free, which was a very reasonable request, and Russia in its arrogance and aggression demanded payment. And what are you to do in that situation? You just say, well, I'm sorry, I can't agree to your terms. I want your gas for free, or my people can starve.
But in the real world, they are actually buying.
Of course.
A lot.
Yeah.
And 95% I read is being paid for in rubles.
Oil imports are up in European purchases of Russian oil, or I don't know by what percentage, but by a significant percentage. They've increased since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And yet apparently we're not buying it anymore.
Well,
so we are buying it, but we're not buying it.
Is that last report correct then? Are we objectively lacking? I did a quick calculation by a third of what Europe needs to get through this winter.
Mm-hmm.
Is that objectively the case, or is it still coming in but through convoluted means?
It's coming in through convoluted means, but those convoluted means are not very reliable. A pipeline directly to onto European land is reliable, like Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2. But both of those effectively have, Nord Stream 2 never got off the ground. Well, it got off the ground, it just never got turned on, which it was meant to last September. And Nord Stream 1 has been partially shut down in terms of its supply to Germany because Zelensky.
Zelensky's call for, they're 6 billion cubic meters short for their winter.
Mm-hmm.
So because they told the world that Russia cut off the gas. That's not what happened. They themselves stopped it.
Right.
And now they're short. So they've put out demand for 6 billion they need from the USA in LNG for this winter.
Right.
They want it for free as well. They said, we'll pay you back in 2 years. Apparently the White House was a bit surprised by that request. But we'll get back to you. Here's another one. Different related sector. This is Bloomberg last week. U.S. government is encouraging companies to break their own U.S. government sanctions against buying Russian fertilizers. U.S. That's a headline. That's a real headline. So
quietly, you have to do it quietly though. Don't say that too loudly. About buy Russian fertilizer. Don't say buy anything from Russia loudly. But
scroll down a bit. It says the efforts. I think it's second paragraph. The effort is part of a complex and difficult negotiations underway involving the United Nations to boost deliveries of fertilizer, grain, and other farm products from Russia and Ukraine. Fourth paragraph. The EU and US have built exemptions into their restrictions on doing business with Russia to allow trade in fertilizer.
Mm-hmm.
Because Russia's a key global supplier. But many shippers, banks, and insurers have been staying away from the trade for fear that they could inadvertently fall afoul of the rules.
Yeah.
Russian fertilizer exports are down 24% this year. U.S. officials, surprised by the extent of the caution, are in the seemingly paradoxical position of looking for ways to boost them. This reminds me of COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
There were reports in the British media when this first started that the SAGE committee advisors and government ministers were a bit surprised by the extent to which people obeyed the lockdown, and they went beyond what does the Führer want. You start to anticipate where he might punish me, so you go way beyond what. And it's the same on the market. The companies are going to go, well, I need to make a quick decision on this upcoming contract. Is it going to cost me more in courts with the US on my back, or will I just try and work something out quicker via Indonesia now? I need it now. So they go this scarper. They just go, okay, we'll go way around Russia, and it ends up going beyond what the letter of the law is. But I think there's more to it than that. I think that's the Bloomberg covering up. The US has built in exemptions from the restrictions. It sounds more like a climb down.
Mm-hmm.
Like they are actually going to different countries and companies and saying, yeah, the sanctions, we know it, but, do keep buying them. We'll overlook. We won't sanction you if you do it.
It'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think they're sitting around in the Kremlin just kind of belly laughing at some of this stuff.
Well, they're probably just, their jaws are just like
it's
on the floor. Like they're like, what are these people doing?
Yeah.
Like,
Their trade balance this year is I think you have to go back 50 years or so, like the best times of the Soviet Union for this kind of equivalent cash intake that they've had since March. Something like
The
300 billion in US dollar equivalent. It's what they make like in
Those
several years.
Those sanctions are really working, eh? Just throw up that Twitter link I sent you, Scotty. It's just a picture. It just struck me like from the Telegraph. Macron finally went to Ukraine this week to show some love. As you can see there, he's showing some love to Zelensky. But like, it's an interesting photograph because, and you can see the video of it where he does that and stuff. But it's like, it's a strange picture, you know. Like he's meeting Macron, he's giving him a hug, but Zelensky's more interested in the photo op. He's looking directly at the camera as Macron's trying to lick his ear. I mean,
Zelensky is the actor.
Yeah.
He knows where the camera is and trained so.
I mean, if you did that, say you, Beau, were Macron and that was your wife, that Zelensky was your wife, you know? Or no, rather, say that Macron was your wife. That's more appropriate anyway. Macron was your wife and you were Zelensky and you saw that picture. You'd be pissed, like.
Yeah.
Or she'd be pissed at you, sorry.
Yeah, because you're not paying attention to her.
Exactly, you know?
Yeah.
Come in for a hug and like you're just looking at somebody else.
Yeah, he's like, what, I don't exist?
Yeah, exactly.
The photos, look at the headline that accompanies it.
Moral superiority.
Britain's moral superiority over Europe is becoming increasingly clear, if we may say so ourselves.
Yeah.
Wow. The Brits. Meanwhile, in the real world, put up this quote from Putin. Over the last couple of days, the annual St. Petersburg Economic Forum was held. Massive turnout, leaders from all over the world, business leaders, probably from the West as well. Putin always speaks to a crowded room. And it's the first full speech he's given since the invasion, I think. This is just one little gem from it. After declaring victory in the Cold War, the United States proclaimed itself to be God's messenger on earth, without any obligations and only interests which were declared sacred. They seem to ignore the fact that in the past decades, new and powerful and increasingly assertive centres have been formed. Each of them develops its own political system and public institutions according to its own model of economic growth, and naturally has the right to protect them and to secure national sovereignty.
And that's where it's going. That's the brave new world we're going into, a multipolar world that Putin has talked about repeatedly. And, you know, the West is desperately trying to stop it from happening. And they're doing it seems that they're doing the Samson option, which is like, if we can't have it, the Israeli Samson option is if we're not going to win, then we're going to wreck the game for everybody, you know.
He used that phrase again, golden billion. You know who first said it? Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. In his critique of late-stage imperialism. I think it's interesting that
the golden billion was
the golden billion refers to the West, lording it over the other billions. Obviously, Putin is no Lenin. He's obviously criticized the hell out of him many other times in other respects, but still, the Ruskies do have this vision of the world and this sort of clear-eyed.
Yeah, based has a historical context to it.
He said the golden billion still treats the other 7 billion as second-class citizens. He said that Russia will never return to autarky and self-isolation. That's a reference to the Cold War. He says the Iron Curtain was nuts. We're going to stay open. So that whole spiel, like in recent months from Western financial analysts, oh my God, globalization has ended. And the guy at the head of BlackRock said it as well. That's the end of the era of globalization. We're all going to just close in on ourselves.
Globalization.
The rest of the world's like, you can do it.
American control.
Yeah. You can do it. We're not. And that was a massive. Something like 50 billion in trade deals were done just in one day or something like that. On Ukraine, very, very short statement. All the objectives of the special military operation will be unconditionally achieved.
Well, they keep saying that, and obviously that's been the case from the very beginning, and they just ignore all the bullshit from the West and the Western media. Even when they come up with, you know, even when they engage in trying to slaughter civilians in Donbass and stuff, you know, Russia's not happy about it, but they're not phased. They're just going to carry on, and that's the way it's going to go, and everybody else can just wail and gnash their teeth all the way through it and pointlessly expend lots of energy on it, and then reality will assert itself. Speaking of Lenin, or rather his old friend, Stalin. I mean, this is yesterday in the UK. There was a bunch of food shortages or food insecurity protests, and this is just one group of them.
Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh! Ho Chi Minh!
Ho Chi Minh, Che Guevara, Stalin.
Oh my God.
That's going to sort the problem out.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
What do you mean?
Why they're chanting about, yeah.
Food, like basically lack of socialism, lack of
Right. They
socialism,
want more communism
Yeah.
They want
of the
more-
20th century.
They want more free food.
Yeah. Well, they're gonna get it. They're gonna get an iron curtain in the West. That's what's falling now. A self-imposed Western iron curtain.
More international politics.
Oh, there's a lot more in Putin's speech.
We can't go through it all.
That he explains stuff. He explains stuff that people don't know in the West. Like,
Just put it in the link in the description. Tell people to read it. People should be reading that stuff.
did you know that 38%? This is what he stated yesterday. 38% of all dollars currently in existence were printed in the last 2 years. And he said that's what causes your inflation.
That's the problem right there.
Not me.
Yeah.
You did it.
Yeah, your government did it. Yep. This is only brief. Like if you have some more from Putin, or you think that it's useful, we can mention it. But this we go to China, and it's we've talked about this before. We've prognosticated on this coming down the pipeline at some point, and it's it's building pace basically. Analysts say China's leader Xi Jinping has set the legal basis for an expansion of the Chinese military's role in other countries. With little published detail, Mr. Xi's government declared he had signed off on a new trial on a set of new trial outlines that allowed for Chinese armed forces operations that were not war. Now that's kind of mirroring more or less. I mean, it's not totally based on that, but it's kind of mirroring the language that the Russians used for their special military operation. It was never declared as a war, and there has been no war declared in Ukraine. It's a special military operation, and this seems to be kind of in line with that, where the Chinese would engage in some kind of an operation relating to Taiwan that no one should misconstrue as a war. This is just a special military excursion onto an island off the coast of China, where we're just going to see what's up.
It's a holiday for the boys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Putin
that's,
said
again,
the West's elite will be overthrown in the near future. Interesting. That's interesting.
Well, he
after
mentioned that
5 years of
as a result.
Russiagate.
Well, he said that in the context of the chaos that they're engendering, basically as a result of their shutting off of energy supplies from Russia, messing with the whole global supply chain issue, supply infrastructure, and that would give rise to protests and a new populism that would overthrow the existing leadership. You have which is the way it would happen, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's if the West is going to, if there's going to be a change in leadership from the current clique, it's going to be as a result of mass protests among the population, as a result of the things that those people in power are actually doing right now.
Yeah. I've asked you before, but do you think Taiwan is this year? Near future? Like,
Possibly, yeah. Towards the end of the year.
that would be absolutely chaotic for everything. I mean, I don't know if it's China's ball to play. Do they wait for the US to provoke them?
No,
Yeah. Why bother?
you don't have to. No, you just do it on your own time frame. Same as
Yeah.
Russia, basically. Although, of course,
Well-
it's influenced by the machinations of the West or whatever. But there's not much they can do. They can't do the same kind of thing they did to Russia in Ukraine. They can't do that to China over Taiwan. You know what I mean? They have been arming Taiwan. They have been, sending in military advisors and all that kind of stuff over over the past number of years, and arming them and all that kind of stuff. But maybe it could be something to do with it. It depends. The US may decide to ship some particular types of weapons or whatever, or air defense systems or something like that that would speed things up. But I think the Chinese have a kind of plan, a time frame. They're on a wait and see approach, but they're tending towards we got to do something about this and they're observing Ukraine. They're observing exactly what the US has done in Ukraine, where when one country, when Russia, for example, takes action provoked by the US, then they see what the US does. It basically tries to embroil you in a long-term war of attrition and bleed you and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it's like that's meant to be a deterrent. That's meant to be seen in theory as a deterrent to China. Like, don't do this and don't take any action in Taiwan because we would embroil you in this long. But
It's going to
Ukraine
be
is a massive country. It's the
massive,
biggest country in
big
Europe.
landmass.
Taiwan's a relatively small island. It's a totally different ball game.
There's nowhere that U.S. can fire from except the ships, at
Yeah.
which point they're inviting the
Right.
ships to be sunk.
Right, and they're not going to do that. They're not going to engage in open war.
Yeah,
open
it has
war.
to be proxy.
It has to be proxy, and there's only so
How-
much proxy you can do in Taiwan.
Yeah. So
You
it
know.
could actually be a quick
Well-
open and shut deal.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Blink of an eye. Before the news cycle can get a handle on it, it'll be over.
So yeah, I suppose the chaos I have in mind is
Sanctions.
sanctions,
All that
economic
kind of
markets and stuff like that.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the US is rolling out this week just because it's, why not? Like, just throw another straw in the camel's back type thing. The US is rolling out COVID vaccines to little kids, basically, to down to 6 months old, from infants, toddlers, and preschoolers.
The
As
only
young as
place in the
6
world.
months. The only place in the world that's doing that, actually. And this is despite the fact that children are effectively immune from COVID. I mean, in terms of, I think I have do I have it here? Yeah.
So this is still a thing, huh?
Why would you add another vaccine to the massive amount of vaccines that kids are already subject to? You know what I mean? And sure, some of those vaccines may be necessary because there are different viruses and illnesses that are they're fairly at a reasonable risk from, not necessarily from death, but just from just from getting sick from. But the idea that they need another one for COVID is ridiculous because all of the data.
They won't be required. Well, they're not going to force them at the
No,
hospital.
and I don't think there'll be a big uptake. Of course, Walensky, the CDC director, that woman, Walensky, said, finally, we have that which American families have been waiting so long for. we're so happy to be able to offer this now. And it's just like, what universe do you live in? There's been a super low uptake around the world amongst parents for vaccinating their children. Like, most parents still have a bit of sense. And they're like, no, I'm not giving my kid an experimental vaccine. Some idiot ones obviously have, but it's a very low uptake. And she construes that as, because it hasn't been available, it's been available to older children, but because it hasn't been available to kids down to 6 months, it's only because that's the reason why there's been, no uptake or low uptake, even in the older kids, whatever. I don't know how she construes it, but basically she's not looking at the fact that kids for whom it already is available, parents haven't been very inclined to encourage their kids to get it.
Yeah, who's been clamoring for it?
Exactly,
Who?
she has. The people making the money from it.
Finally, all these non-existent people
Yeah, exactly.
Can get the vaccine for their 6-month-old.
Yeah, just go to that last link. This is from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Just scroll down to summary of findings, and this was published on June 9th, 2022. So just about a week ago or 10 days ago. Check out their cumulative mortality from 46 states.
Of COVID, yeah, from COVID.
Among states reporting, children were 0.00% to 0.032% of all COVID deaths.
Oh, Jesus, terrible.
In states reporting, 0.00% to 0.02 of all child COVID deaths child COVID cases resulted in death. So this idea that, and of course you'd have to look at those the actual numbers of so-called child COVID deaths, because we know that people were described as having died from COVID when in fact that wasn't actually the primary cause of death. So it's still true to say that children are effectively, if you take the total number of children on the globe, let's say, who will be exposed to it, to any virus, and to this virus in particular, are effectively immune to it. They're not in any danger from it, you know. And yet, what you roll out to make it available, and you know you're going to give it to some parents are going to be stupid enough to actually to add it to the already burdensome load of vaccines that children are forced to take, actually legally required to take. You're going to add another one.
They would say that you've added a conjecture that it's burdensome. They're like the more the better. Vaccines are what keep us going.
Yeah,
you know?
well, whatever.
There are a lot of people out there who believe that. That's why they could have those reports during COVID that said herd immunity, far right conspiracy theory. Without the vaccines, we're all dead.
Yeah,
You
well,
know?
I suppose it's a matter of
If
opinion.
not from COVID, but then from everything else. Like they really believe that it's vaccines
We'll put it this
that
way.
have given us modernity.
We'll put it
The
this
last
way.
100 years of prosperity.
I don't actually have the details, but kids in America, I think, get the most vaccines.
Yeah,
or
for
far get
sure.
the most vaccines of anyone
By
in the
far,
world.
by far.
And, you know, several times as many, in some cases, as other countries, other developed world countries. And so why is that necessary when in other countries it's not? Why aren't all the children who only get a quarter or a fifth of the vaccines that they get in America, why are they not all dying? Why are they coming down with all these diseases? It's obviously bullshit. Money making
like
scheme.
compared to Africa, where the level of vaccination is extremely low.
Right. Yeah.
They're engineering a new master race.
Oh, now Neil, you've just gone full conspiracy tard there.
Well,
A new master race. Yeah, there was something else about kids and COVID vaccines. I can't remember right now. Wasn't that important. Anyway, yeah. So, what else you got? Taking into consideration that we're all
sweltering and need to get AC in here. Poroshenko, citing Sun Tzu, boasts in an interview with Deutsche Welle that Minsk was a delaying tactic, which we could tell obviously.
All the truth
It's
coming out
interesting
now.
that he could admit that was a delaying tactic to quote build up our army to retake Donbass, Crimea. So,
and he thinks the Russians weren't aware of it.
right?
Is he that stupid?
But that's
public
not,
weren't aware of
That's
it.
not public. That's not official narrative. But he's couldn't help but boast.
And then, but they get to criticize Russia for not adhering to it in Minsk or something like that, even though it was obviously Ukraine who wasn't adhering to Minsk, or it's like demand that Russia can, stop its invasion of Ukraine and continue to adhere to these protocols that we both signed up to that we have no intention of adhering to. Yeah, it's like sell us your gas for free, or you're bad. You see the bullshit we have to deal with and actually explain to people? Isn't it crazy? Like, I mean, it's like as plain as the nose in your face. It should be as plain as the nose in your face, but there's something stopping people from recognizing it. At least it seems that way, because, I don't know how you get a read on it. You get a read on it from Twitter or something. We can't get a read on like what everybody thinks, but when we do, we try and get it from Twitter. Try and have it not be in an echo chamber on Twitter and see what other people are saying. And a lot of people are stupid people out there who are doing the whole, Slava Ukraine, pray for Ukraine, send weapons to Ukraine. There are a lot of people doing that. But I think there are more people who are just like going, this is bullshit, let's ignore it. We need to focus on our own issues. And especially in the US, I think a lot of people there are like, fuck Ukraine, we need to focus on problems in this country, But when we talk to real people, they don't want to talk about it. Because they know it's too complicated, and they probably sense somewhere in the back of their minds or something, or somewhere in their being that it is bullshit, but it's too much for them to try and figure it out. So if they're forced to say anything about it, all you'll get is a repetition of a headline that they read. Yeah, Putin's bad, isn't he? Isn't Putin bad? I think I read that
He's a dictator.
Putin's bad. Ukraine, war bad. People shouldn't have war, and gas prices are too high, and who's willing for that?
I saw a Ukrainian flag on the street the other day.
Oh, yeah?
In a small town, like 2,000 people, small town. Ukrainian flag next to the local flag. Also, on the way back today, the place that was a vaccination center at the peak of the madness was open, and there were people going in, all with masks.
For ice cream?
No, for a booster.
Getting their boosters. The booster's still going.
Yeah. I wouldn't have known that, but that I was passing by early in the morning when it was open.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
because
The early bird catches the vaccine.
I don't know. They maybe there are more of them in cities. I guess that's probably a given. And then it's who you know.
Oh, you have to get a hookup, like you have to
Like,
a hooking or
I think that
a connection to get a vaccine these days.
the social media bubble thing is also a real life bubble.
Yeah.
People will actually, the people they associate with will be either one or the other, you know, or tend towards one side or the other on the current thing.
Yeah,
Um,
the current thing.
so when I'm out there and I meet them, and I'm like still surprised because I don't usually see them. I only hear about it in the media. And I think surely this is inflated. Surely most people don't believe this stuff.
Well, they're talking about seventh wave now, you know,
Right.
and there's people talking in the UK. We mentioned it last week. Again, they've repeated it during the week and stuff, that in the UK and in France and I don't know, probably other European countries, probably in America as well, talking about this summer, this month, like as in this month, June or July, I don't know. There's going to be another wave of COVID and people are dying.
Monkeypox.
No COVID.
Yeah.
A new
another word.
strain.
Yeah.
The world we live in, man.
Hmm.
It's not in a good state. It needs an enema. I don't know who's going to supply that enema though. It's a big one, no. Somehow, some kind of cosmic enema has to sort things out, because otherwise it's going nowhere. Anyway, have you got some jokes there? Tell us a joke.
The EU is going to give Ukraine candidate status. Ah!
Hilarious. That's the best one.
Never
yeah,
gonna happen.
Sure. They talk that kind of shit all the time. And then they backtrack by saying, well, they don't backtrack. In the same breath, they say, yeah, well, it's not going to happen straight away. Like, we're going to give, yeah, they're going to get fast track entry. Fast track being like 40 years.
Yeah. Whatever's left of it.
Yeah. And who's it? Zarakova, Russian Kremlin spokesperson. And somebody else said it in response. I can't remember. Someone in the Russian government said if they talk about this war, you know, them continuing to supply weapons to Ukraine, for that we need to, like the Western government saying we need to continue to supply weapons to Ukraine for the next couple of years. We need to like lock ourselves into this and prepare for 2 years of continuing supply of support and weapons and funds and all that kind of stuff to Ukraine. And again, someone in the Russian government said, they keep talking about this 2 years' time, but like in 2 years' time, how
Yes.
do they know there's going to be Ukraine?
Medvedev said it.
Medvedev.
The so-called Atlanticist.
How do
Turns
they-
out he's actually,
How do they know there's going to be Ukraine for them to send any weapons to?
yeah,
Which was a little hint of
Yeah.
what the Russian plan is, basically.
yeah.
At least no Ukraine in its current form. That's pretty much clear at this point. Anyway, yeah, we leave it there. It's almost 2 hours. We're a bit late starting, but it's almost 2 hours, and I think that was a pretty good rundown. And Bo, very good to have you here. I know you won't be here next week, but you'll be here in spirit, or at least your spirit animal will be here.
Yeah.
That unicorn behind you.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, it's his spirit animal.
It's his
now.
spirit animal now.
I
It's
gotta-
transferred to him.
You know,
yeah.
we have to
Right.
represent all diversities and genders and
Yeah, yeah.
races.
And last week was our first, not our first show, but last week was it the first show? Anyway, it was, I think it was the first show since Scotty, we didn't mention, I don't know if Scotty wants to mention it, but somebody in the chat last week wanted to hear about Scotty got married actually. He's a one of those traditionalist people who get married and all that kind of stuff. And weird, it's just weird. I don't really understand. Do you understand that? I don't know why people get married anymore.
I mean,
He showed off his rings, good man.
But anyway.
it's the trad life. You know, you got to go for it.
Trad life.
Yes.
And
You should get a new shirt like that.
and was it good,
Trad
Scotty?
life.
Yeah, did you have fun?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did people get drunk and stuff?
Yes, I didn't, unfortunately.
didn't. Well, you're not allowed to.
No,
You're the
yeah, I'm
groom,
not.
so-
I had to make sure everyone else was having fun.
Having
so,
fun, yeah.
Yeah.
You're just
So
plan-
now I'm waiting for the next, whoever gets married next. And,
Yeah.
you have to invite me because,
Right.
yeah, I'm gonna.
Bo's gonna marry that unicorn.
There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. You better not misgender it.
Don't misgender your spirit animal. Yeah. All right. So that's all you get in Scotty's wedding. That's all the information we can divulge. So
Videos and photos coming next week.
Yeah. Next week's show will be entirely devoted. It'll be a video and photo montage of
Yeah.
I hope there's no videos of
you?
some people dancing.
I hope not.
Oh, that reminds me.
No.
Not you.
That guy right there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So listen, we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for listening, watching, commenting. Don't forget to smash all the buttons if you haven't done so already. That means like and subscribe and all that. We'll be back next week with another show, possibly, and whatever's been happening between now and then, we'll be on it. So tune in then, and until then, have a good week. See you later.
Thanks for watching. See you next week.
See ya.
Can't stop the signal now.